Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Value Exchange. I'm here with my regular co-host Rob. Hello, Rob.
Hello. You want me to say something?
Not really.
I'm Rob. No, okay, I'm not going to say anything then. Go on.
I feel we've over-egged the introductions, so I'm going to move us on, if that's all right. Today we are joined wonderfully by Professor Atul Shah, who is a research fellow and professor at London City University. Interestingly, we met Professor Atul as he acted as a referee for one of our young leaders during our Young Leaders programme. We chatted and we've kept in touch ever since, which is really exciting. And has recently released a book, 30 years in the making, he's just told us before we started, called Inclusive and Sustainable Finance, Leadership, Ethics and Culture. And this is a field that is sort of really very interesting to us, an area which we feel, is not, I'm going to be quite rude, fit for purpose at the moment for moving the world forward with more social value. So I'm going to ask you, Professor Atul, to introduce yourself, if you wouldn't mind, just a bit about you, your stories, how you got to where you are, and then Rob's going to dive in with many questions.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me on this show, and thank you for your enthusiasm for my work. My name is Atul K Shah. I was born in Kenya, in East Africa, and have been in the UK since 1980, so nearly 25 years. 45 years. And I'm really excited about this latest book, research monograph I've written for Routledge called Inclusive and Sustainable Finance, Leadership, Ethics and Culture. I just come back from a month-long book tour of India. And, essentially, my aim is, after having spent, over 30 years compiling the research which led to this book and experiencing being a teacher, being an accountant, being a media spokesperson, having all that experience and bringing the theory and the experience together, and also the experience of what I would say cultural neutrality. That's the word accountants or finance people use when they talk about their equations, or when they talk about accounting or finance, as if there is something called cultural neutrality. So I kind of have experienced being neutralized culturally over the 30-year period. And out of that has come out this book, which actually completely shifts the paradigm of accounting and finance by making culture absolutely central to it. And also by saying that culture is not mono, but culture is something very plural, very diverse. And therefore, there is not one accounting or one finance theory, but there are many accountings and many finance theories, and really good, Rob and Annabelle, really good practices of accounting and finance, which are sustainable, which are holistic, which are caring and compassionate, are actually hiding in plain sight because of the way we have theorized about accounting and finance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, we could talk forever, and there's so much in the book. Buy the book, read the book, spend time with the book. It's an important book because number one, it's a reader. You wouldn't expect, with so many years of research and Atul's credentials, for it to be so accessible, but it is completely accessible. And it's an important book. I think the headline that I wanted to start with was that there's this expression, holding truth to power, which you talk a lot about in the book. And one of the things is that this is so important that often we don't talk about it a lot. What could it be like? What should it be like? And it's in many places quite shocking to read um, so eloquently such a damning indictment of finance and accounting. Annabelle and I met 24 years
Four.
ago in EY. They're one of these big accounting companies. Annabelle has since worked for PwC. One of the reasons that we left that environment was not because it wasn't a wonderful organization and a wonderful culture to work within, but that actually we didn't solve any problems when it came to people and planet. So our quest, if you like, in the last 24 years has been, how not do we just hold truth to power, but how do we engage in innovating? You talk a lot about action research, trying, learning, experimenting to find out what works. But I want to start where, in some ways, where you started with the book, with this holding truth to power. And how did you become brave enough to write the book? Because a bit of it was about how you develop the bravery, the courage, I think is the word you use. How did that come about?
Yeah, that's thank you so much. I think, in a way, business education is very much about being a friend of power, and be and taking advantage of power, and making profit out of power and influence, and therefore it's a lot of it is pro business. I've even found people who do academics who do critical research of business, when they come out into public forums, they keep quiet, or they say something very different from what they've written about. It just happened last week, a world expert in an area, when he was at a seminar, he was saying something very different from what he's written about, because obviously he was corrupted, right? And I think this is where I actually go draw back to my upbringing and my tradition and culture, the Jain culture, which is one of the oldest living cultures on the planet. And in that culture, kindness towards all living beings is quite central. And therefore, I assume actually that when you're brought up in that way, with that kind of innocence and authenticity within yourself, it's almost spontaneous that when you see something wrong, you don't even calculate what will what will result when you open your mouth. You just do it, right? And as a result, and Rob, you rightly said, I have suffered a lot by speaking truth to power. I think anybody who does that does suffer a lot. But instead of diminishing my courage, actually over time, it has enhanced it, because you also meet, Annabelle, you also meet people along the way, like yourselves, who actually support and encourage you, and it gives you a sense of personal inner peace as well, that you're actually authentic. I was just listening to Radio 4. There's a series called Forethought, and
Yes.
they've been doing it for many years, but they've closed it down now. This was the last episode, and the producer came on the last episode, and she said that each person who came on that series was very authentic. And I was fortunate that I actually got a slot on that series. So, this idea of being authentic and then, yeah, speaking the truth becomes easy. And I can give you examples of that. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and any if somebody is sitting out there on the ether watching this, thinking that's okay for Professor Atul, he's an expert, he's got 30 years to build that courage, but it's difficult being me. I am ACCA qualified, member of the audit committee, yada yada. I've read his book. I wish I was more like that, but it's do you have any words of advice that to help somebody accelerate maybe the rite of passage and not have to do the
Yeah,
30 years of graft to get there,
yeah. It's not. I wouldn't recommend it as a recipe, but I mean, take the example of Greta Thunberg. right? She started doing that at a much younger age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And much more publicly. Actually, I guess she started in the local school, but later on became a public figure. And has been very bold about it. So, in some sense, the earlier you start, the easier it kind of gets because it becomes part of your habit. The other side is that the only flip side is your personal finances and personal lifestyle and expenditure. So if you live within your means, and if if your lifestyle is simple rather than extravagant, then the chances are it becomes easier to take that risk and to make those challenges. Rob, the other experience I have had in terms of speaking truth to power in this country is that it makes my color very visible, even more visible. So I use the word double black, that not only am I black on the outside, but my theory and my science is black. And that increases the risk that one faces. And again, I can add, like, women from ethnic minorities would also be, have a kind of gender issue as well on top of all this, right? So unfortunately, this is the reality. Now, the great opportunity we have at the present is that the entire human species is under existential threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've turned that into an opportunity. I'm saying to scholars who kind of keep on, their old theories or their anthropocentric views, I'm speaking up, and they are having to listen because at one level they don't know anything outside the Anthropocene, especially social scientists. Social
Mm.
scientists are very steeped in the Anthropocene without even realizing that that's what they're doing. But at the
So,
same time,
so
yeah.
I just want to give listeners just a flavour of a tiny paragraph from your book, um, and how punchy paragraph after paragraph is, backed with evidence, not just assertions without evidence. But so um, Atul says finance, instead of being a source of equality and sustainable growth, has become a cause of the environmental devastation, social chaos, and economic inequality. The disciplines and premier institutions of accounting and finance are undergoing a crisis of legitimacy. Now, that's just a paragraph, and then there's another and another, and you kind of like have a waves upon waves of this that causes one to reflect and pause and go, well, what does that really mean? And I just wonder whether in the barriers in the discussions with people, that whether people from the profession have come to you and go, you're wrong. No, it's not. It's all good, despite the fact that the truth is hiding in plain sight. Despite the fact that we're nowhere near Paris 1.5 degrees climate change. If you aggregate all of the national pledges, despite the fact that we're $176 trillion further away from the UN Sustainability Development Goals 12 months ago, according to the UN, and that's without Ukraine. That people are arguing that you're wrong, that we're not facing an existential crisis of social and environmental existential magnitude. Do people tell you you're wrong?
Not really, actually. They just stop listening. Those who don't agree, they stop listening.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
Also,
Can I just do
yeah,
you think they don't agree, or do you think that they just cannot envisage that
Listen.
there is anything else that could be? Because that's sort of where I am. Is
yeah,
I want people to open their minds to the world being something different than it is now. Because if we don't do that, as you've just said, we are existentially threatened, and it's going to take some change,
yeah. I
real
mean,
change.
Yes, I think there are a variety of people out there, and yes, there are some who also don't want to change, who
Yeah, of course.
want to hide under the cover, or who don't want to see different ideas, or who are quite fundamentalist. Economists can be the most
Yeah.
fundamentalist
No. Yeah.
people
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
on the planet, and there are many people now beginning to say that. There's a whole student rebellion movement called Rethinking Economics, which I'm working
Hooray.
with, because
Yeah.
they've now started a new chapter on rethinking accounting, which I am a part of. So there are, groups like that, and it's important that we ally with those kinds of groups as well. uh, and Yeah, I mean, I think there are some people we are never going to be able to
No.
persuade. So there's no point in kind of banging the head against a brick wall.
No.
But one learns, one tries. Sometimes one gets into a debate, sometimes not. And nowadays, there are many different media options available as well. Just to give you an example, I was at the Financial Times offices on Tuesday, and I met several editors who I've come to know over the years. And it was, I didn't have any specific agenda, but I wanted to have those conversations because I could see that the paper could also and change to positively influence sustainable finance, and it is doing some things in that area, of course. But there are some more radical things that I would like it to do, and that requires patience, persuasion, relationship building. Those are kind of instinctive skills for a Jain, right? And um, and and it's quite surprising. I felt as if I was with a family. When I was there, they welcomed me very nicely. They talked to me, they listened to me, they took my books with them, and things like that. So now, I feel I've opened a conversation. uh,
Yeah, and if the worst that you can expect is that people don't listen to you, um, then for our viewers and people who are thinking, actually, I'm not sure that this is right. I would like more of this and less of that. If the worst that can happen to them is that people don't listen, that's not so bad, right? I also am surprised that when you speak your mind, that actually the worst that can happen is somebody won't listen. I think that's a really insightful point. That if that's the worst, it's not life threatening. And if you
yeah,
really feel, then you should
yeah.
talk.
I'll give you an example from last week. It was really surprising. There's in the city of London, which is the laboratory of
Yeah,
modern finance, if you like, right? They have something called the Gresham College, and they have since the 16th century they've had a series of public lectures called Gresham lectures,
yeah, yeah.
and I attended. And this time the topic, it was organized, it was hosted by the Lord Mayor of London, the Mayor of the City of London,
Mm.
and the topic was financial literacy and inclusion, right?
Mm.
And there were a range of speakers, and of course there was a lot of concern about the level of knowledge about mathematics, numeracy skills, the fact that 15 million people only have primary level numeracy skills, 20 million people only have savings less than £100 in the bank account, things like that. There was a lot of empathy and concern, and I heard it and I agreed with a lot of that. But I also wanted to get my point across. And the point was, and I think you will also relate to this, there is a big engine out of financial institutions which deliberately exploit financial illiteracy, which deliberately make complex financial products so that people don't understand the underlying interest rate, the underlying fees and charges,
Mm.
etc., etc. And so there was no time for questions, but I kind of muscled my way in deliberately. There were 400 people at Guildhall in that
Mm.
lecture,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So I muscled my way in, and I said, look, these are the realities. Credit card interest rates were 24% when interest rates were 0%. Savings rates are nothing, and when interest rates are 4%. So, these big banks are actively exploiting, expropriating, and confusing our citizenry, right? So, what are we going to do about that, right? I asked that question, and you could have heard
Heard a pin
a
drop.
pin
Yeah.
drop, right? But guess what happened afterwards? The organizers came to me and said, "We would like you to give a Gresham lecture."
Excellent.
Oh, whoa!
Can
Fantastic.
you can
Fantastic!
you believe that? That was my
Whoa!
one aim.
Round of applause.
And they
Round of
actually
applause.
came to see me and say they would like because the whole idea of the Gresham lectures is about speaking truth to power. They're public lecture, etc., etc. So I didn't expect it, but I was very grateful. So sometimes it happens, and then you have like conversations, when you're at an event. So, but this sticking my hand out, speaking up. Remember, English is not my first language. Uh, yeah, I and any foreign student who comes to this country, I was just speaking to my niece. She said, she's so brilliant. She was raised in Kenya like me and comes from a really, really kind of a cultured and educated family. And her first year at university, she said, was a complete cloud. She found she found it so difficult. She felt quite nervous, etc. And there was nobody giving her a kind of welcoming hand intellectually and saying, actually, you have something new to tell us. You have something better to teach us. Something even a little bit like that could have changed her confidence, but it didn't happen, right? She's going to a top university, etc., etc. So, I went through that for years and years. I was quiet in public fora. I felt nervous. I felt quiet, but over time and through the research and the study and the engagement, one builds the confidence. And there was another event last week where it was an invite only event, where there were a group of professors in the audience, mainly economists. And I actually used one word from the book. I said economics has been a chainsaw on nature and society in front of them, right?
Hey.
You will be you will be surprised, Rob. Nobody disagreed, Annabelle.
No.
Nobody disagreed. In fact, some of them actually came up to me and said yours was the most memorable speech. So you know that because the world is changing, world is being forced to change. Professors of economics have something called children. One professor came up to me.
Yeah.
One professor came up to me and said, both my daughters are vegetarian, right?
Yeah, and we had the same when we were doing research around just the thing that is ESG and business, and of course CEOs. They're all being held to account by their kids. For what they're doing. So you're in the same way. Completely right. Go kids is what I
Okay,
say.
so
Go kids.
it's time to just peel the onion a little bit more on what this great book is about. And arguably, it's my argument, it's not really about finance and accounting at all. You could apply this logic to any profession, which is kind of stripping out the humanity, if you like, from organizations, from professions, from practicing things. Um, and it, in a nutshell, my words, but then I'm going to ask you to explain the book. This is a book about values, beliefs, humanity, culture, not process and procedures and mechanics of stripping out all the human stuff. We need to put our conscience into the world of work. We need to put our own values, our own special passion and purpose. But can you give us, a short summary of what the book's about in your words? Because
Yeah,
that's my interpretation. Everyone's going to have a different,
Mm.
a different summary, and you'll probably go, "No, it's nothing to do with that, Rob." But
thank
in
you.
your words,
Yeah,
they're my words.
at a very simple level, if we were to take a currency note out of our pocket and read it, we would discover that all it is a promise. It says, "I promise to pay this person £10," and that promise is from the Bank of England.
Mhm.
Now, what we have done over the years is convert this fiction called money into a commodity and a measure and an objective science, right? But actually, it's a human creation. It's a cultural construct. Birds don't have economics. They don't have money. They, and still they survive. They
Not
still
that we
sing.
not that we know of.
Yeah, yeah. Not not only do they just feed, but they also sing. They give us music, right? So so and in fact, if we look at our own history, Annabelle, we only it's only in the last 200 or 300 years where money has become so central to all aspects of our lives. For a long time, there was a big part of our life which was shared, which was community, where money played very little part. So this fiction has come to infect us like a pandemic. It has controlled, it has converted our culture, from now. So nowadays, everything seems to be about money, including family and relationships. Community has completely been broken by selfishness, etc., etc. So the at a very simple level, I'm just saying, let's go back to basics. Let's understand the nature and limits of money, and let's also understand the huge diversity of communities, beliefs, faiths, and cultures in the world, and their attitudes to money, right? And there are still, even today, there are many communities which do not prioritize money, and which are very simple, which have very low expectations about wealth, and actually prioritize things like friendship, relationships, shared coexistence, village life. You heard the phrase ubuntu, that it's a village who makes a person, not a person. So there are, these communities are still there. Yes, they are struggling. Some of them are on the margins of society, but they're still there, and they are still picking up the so these are places from where we can learn about sustainability, because we cannot build a community in a crisis. Yeah, we cannot build relationships and friendships in a crisis. So wherever in the world there are communities, those are places with whom we should work to try and build a sustainable life and a sustainable society. Learn from them, but also point to them some of the scientific challenges, etc. So,
And just on that, you talk about an organisation which is not small called Handelsbanken, which is
Yay.
well, Annabelle knows
I
it
spent
well. She
5 years
was
in Sweden. I lived in Sweden for 5 years. So they were
so.
my bank.
So, can you remember a bit about their business model and their links to community, and how they, as a big organisation, prevent themselves becoming too big to
yeah.
fail at a community level?
Yeah,
What's the
thank you.
story there?
Thank you. That's a really good example of of hope, if you like, in the area of sustainable finance. Some 50 years ago, I think, their CEO had this vision that there's too much bureaucracy, it's too centralized, too hierarchical, and he wanted to make the bank local, personal, and non-bureaucratic and non-hierarchical. So basically, they gave a lot of power to branch managers, created very small branches with limited number of people, and basically asked the branch manager to evaluate the loan application and to take a decision and empowered the branch manager to take a decision. But alongside that, they also put a value on relationships, on trust, on community, and localization. So actually, Rob, you will be surprised, that used to be the model of Barclays. That used to be
Used to be the
Yeah,
model of, but absolutely, we had our
exactly. Yeah,
relationship banker,
yeah.
didn't we? A
yeah,
manager in
exactly.
Barclays.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
sadly, I'm always reminded of Captain Mannering when you think about community bank managers. But yes, absolutely. I mean, even when I was a student, which is, ages ago, I had to go home to talk to the bank. I got my little account when I was 16 locally, and, to go and sort out my debt, I had to go and talk to the loan manager, in the bank at home. It was even then, so I mean, that's 30 years
They
ago, but
they used to be invited to weddings, for example.
exactly, they were part of the
They're
community.
part
Yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah,
community.
yeah.
So, in a sense, Handelsbanken is still doing that today.
Right.
Not many people know that they are doing it yet, and they're growing fast because the customers are coming by word of mouth and reputation. And after having experienced the pain of being a transactional bank, of meeting transactional bankers and anonymous cold kind of systems which take decisions on their loan application, many customers are getting fed up and moving to Handelsbanken. So here is an example to me of a bank which puts culture and relationships at the heart of their operations, and still succeed, profit, and grow at the same time. So it's the very antithesis of modern economics and finance, and yet it is succeeding, it's operating, and it shows that it works. And it's growing organically. One of the other main themes of the book is about organic business and organic growth and organic finance. So, which is where you don't suddenly try to get a big loan and expand your operations all over the world, but you grow within scale, within your limits, within your controls, and within your managerial capabilities. And also, this idea that the owner managed business is the ideal form of business, because especially when it comes to sustainability, because family businesses often are created to be passed on to future generations. So they care about the reputation, they care about the relationship, they care about the customers, the suppliers, and they want to pass this on to the next generation. Now, the Jains happen to be a highly successful business community and finance community all over the world, and this is one of the main reasons, because to them, trust is important, relationships are important, honor is important, reputation is important. And like Handelsbanken, they grow within their scale and their limits, and they are not greedy to make quick money fast. So here we have, I gave you a few examples of stories which are hiding in plain sight. I basically unpicked those stories, have shared them through the book, but I'm just saying this is only, the tip of the iceberg. There are many such stories out there, small and large, all over the world, and yet they are not given the voice, the expression, because of the way we teach business and the way we theorize about business and economics.
Well, I think in a soundbite of half an hour, we've just done over half an hour. That's an
Yeah.
ideal place to sort of draw a line, because I think, certainly I want to talk more, I want to learn more, I want to, take this conversation further
Yeah.
forward. But for now, I think it would be any final thoughts, words, Annabelle, that you wanted to say, or Atul, in terms of wrapping it up. But it's been and for me, an honour. And I think this will be an important digital asset that
Yeah.
I'll treasure, and it will be really important for future
Yeah.
generations to take forward. Any final
Yeah.
words,
So
both?
the
Yeah.
other word that is important that I bring out in the book is leadership, finance leadership, right? Now, there are thousands of books on leadership, but so few on what good finance leadership looks like. And the reason is very simple. We cannot talk about good finance leadership without talking about ethics, about conscience, about morality, and about values. This is the value exchange. And values are central to good finance leadership, and we need to bring them to the center. And I'll close with a story. One of the top investment bankers in India is Vallabh Banshali, who I interviewed for this book. And he is top not just because he's successful and rich, but also because he has been a very trusted advisor and a very long-term kind of thinker for a long time. And I went to his boardroom when I was in Mumbai, and there's a very large painting in the boardroom, right? And in this painting, and he commissioned this painting, in this painting there is Buddha, there's Mahavira, there's Gandhi, and there is Warren Buffett. And
Nice. Oh,
Charlie
lovely.
Munger. And actually, he has put all of these kind of icons in his boardroom, right? So he's completely not shy about his values. He's willing to share them and to show them as well, doesn't want to hide them. But also the values are quite internationalist. They, you can learn from any culture, any race, any, but good principles are critical to financial success, and he espouses that. And and I've seen many of the projects that he's done, including some of the philanthropy they've done, which is of very large scale and very anonymous. And it just shows that they understand. Not only do they theorize about the nature and limits of money, they understand that money is there to serve the community. And if you earn a lot of money, that's your good fortune. It's not just because of your effort and your abilities. It's your punya, we say so.
Wonderful. Annabelle?
Yeah, no, I'm just drawn to the importance of sort of getting the stories out there. I feel, in the world, if you go and seek out information, it's very negative. It's all, that we're all collapsing. There's war. There's just, and I feel I want to uplift the world to inspire them to do things differently. And I feel that you need to have more stories. There's a lot of people on a similar parallel mission, like we are with you. We're all, I feel, pushing in the same direction, but we just need more and more stories of where it's working really well, and share them more, because then people will become inspired and understand that they can see something that can work for them, because without that they just don't know what to do. I don't mean that disparagingly. I'm just like, it's like, well, why would they? So yeah, I'm inspired, and it's been fantastic. Thank
Well,
you.
that's
Here we
exactly
go.
what you're doing with this podcast. You're sharing these stories, and more people will come to hear them. So thank you for that.
Well, from
It's
our
been
special guest today, Professor Atul Shah, from me, Rob Pye, and from Annabelle Lambert. Until next time, bye
bye.
bye.